Question number 7. It reads, if she dashed the food, she would die. Option A, eats. Option B, had eaten. Option C, has eaten. And option D, ate. In case you don't know, this question is from the topic completion of if statements. How did I know that this question is from this topic, completion of if statements? Let me tell you. If you look at the question, you will find out that it begins with if. Therefore, it is an if statement. In case you don't know, an if statement is a statement that begins with or that contains if. Insofar the statement here begins with if, it is an if statement. Please note that an if statement is conditional in nature. In other words, another name for an if statement is a conditional statement. If you look at the question the second time, you will find out that there is a gap for us to complete. In other words, they want us to complete this if statement. That is why this question is from the topic completion of if statements. Whenever you are faced with a question under completion of if statements, the first thing you are expected to do is divide the statement into two parts. So if I divide this statement into two parts, I will have the first part. If she dash the food. And the second part, she would die. If you look at the first part, you will find out that it carries the if. It contains the if. In case you don't know, the part of an if statement that carries or contains the if is what we call the if clause. The if clause is the part of an if statement that carries or contains the if. The if clause is also called the subordinate clause or the dependent clause. If you look at the second part of the if statement here, you will find out that it does not carry the if. It does not contain the if. The part of an if statement that does not carry or contain the if is what we call the main clause. The main clause is the part of an if statement that does not carry the if. The main clause is also called the independent clause. I believe that is understood. Please note that in completion of if statements, they can complete the if clause and ask you to complete the main clause. They can also complete the main clause and ask you to complete the if clause. In other words, in completion of if statements, they can complete one clause and ask you to complete the other clause. If you are faced with such a question, how should you answer the question correctly? Let me help you. Roman figure 1. When the if clause contains a present tense verb, a simple present tense verb, and they want you to complete the main clause, then the gap in the main clause should be filled with shall if the main clause begins with I or WE, the pronoun I or the pronoun WE, or will if the main clause begins with the pronoun she, he, you, they, or it, plus a present plural verb. In case you don't know, a present plural verb is a verb in the present tense and will not end with s, es, or ies. A verb in the present tense and does not end with s, es, or ies is what we call a present plural verb. However, if the main clause begins with the pronoun I or we, and shall is not found in the options, then you can substitute will. You will do this when the if clause contains a present tense verb, a simple present tense verb. I believe that is understood. Roman figure 2. When the if clause contains a past tense verb, a simple past tense verb, and they want you to complete the main clause, then the gap in the main clause should be filled with would. But if you cannot find would, you can look for any of could, should, or might, plus a present plural verb. I have told you that a present plural verb is a verb in the present tense and will not end with s, es, or ies. Please note that if the options contain would, could, should, or might, plus a present plural verb, then settle for would. It is when would cannot be found in the options that you look for any of could, should, or might, and follow it up with a present plural verb. You will do this when the if clause contains a past tense verb, a simple past tense verb. I believe that is understood. Roman figure 3. When the if clause contains had plus past participle verb, PPT for short, and they want you to complete the main clause, then the gap in the main clause should be filled with would plus have plus a past participle verb, PPT for short. But remember, if would is not found in the options, I told you in Roman figure 2 that you can look for any of could, should, or might, and then follow it up with have and a past participle verb, PPT for short. You will do this when the if clause contains had plus a past participle verb, PPT for short. I believe that is understood. Roman figure 4. When the if clause contains has or have, depending on whether the subject is singular or plural, plus a past participle verb, PPT for short, and they want you to complete the main clause, then the gap in the main clause should be filled with shall or will plus have plus a past participle verb, PPT for short. I am saying shall or will because it depends on what begins the main clause. I told you in Roman figure 1 that if what begins the main clause is the pronoun I or the pronoun we, then use shall. But if what begins the main clause is the pronoun she, he, you, they, or it, then use will. However, I said that if what begins the main clause is the pronoun I or the pronoun we, and you cannot find shall in the options, then you can settle for will. You just come and follow it up with have and then a past participle verb, PPT for short. You will do this when the if clause contains has or have, depending on whether the subject is singular or plural, plus a past participle verb, PPT for short. I believe this is understood. I know a majority of you are still confused. Let us apply everything here to the question with a view to answering it correctly. If you look at this if statement, you will find out that we can divide it into two parts. The first part is if she dash the food. And the second part is she would die. The first part of the if statement carries the if. So this part is the if clause. The second part of the if statement does not carry the if. So this part is the main clause. You will find out that the main clause is completed. They want us to complete the if clause. That is why it is the if clause that carries the gap for us to complete. The main clause is completed. They want us to complete the if clause. Let us look at the main clause that is completed. Let us get the main clause that is completed analyzed. If you look at the main clause that is completed, you will find out that it carries would plus a present plural verb. Would plus a present plural verb. Would plus a present plural verb. Main clause. If you look at those 4 Roman figures I gave you not quite long, you will find out that we are expected to use Roman figure 2 for this question. Because it is Roman figure 2, check that the main clause carries would plus a present plural verb. If you trace Roman figure 2 to the if clause, you will find out that the if clause should carry a past tense verb. In other words, the gap in the if clause here should be filled with a past tense verb, since we are using Roman figure 2 to answer this question. For that reason, the correct option for this question is option D, because it is option D that contains a past tense verb, which is ate, because the past tense of it is ate. So that the question reads, if she ate the food, she would die. I believe that is understood. I know a majority of you are still confused. Let us look at another question under completion of if statements, so that you will understand much or a lot better. Let us look at this question so that you will understand better. It reads, if I had seen him, I dash him. Option A, would arrest. Option B, will have arrested. Option C, would have arrested. And option D, shall arrest. If I divide this if statement into 2 parts, I will have the first part, if I had seen him. And the second part, I dash him. You will find out that the first part contains the if. The first part carries the if. So the first part is called the if clause. The second part does not carry the if. So we call the second part the main clause. What have you noticed? They completed the if clause. They want you to complete the main clause. The if clause is completed. They want you to complete the main clause. That is why it is the main clause that carries the gap for you to complete. Okay, the if clause that is completed, let us get it analyzed. It contains had plus a past participle verb, PPT for short. Of the 4 Roman figures I gave you, not quite long, you will find out that it is Roman figure 3 we are expected to use to answer this question. Because it is Roman figure 3 that the if clause contains had plus a past participle verb, PPT for short. So we are going to use Roman figure 3 to answer this question. If you look at the main clause in Roman figure 3, you will find out that it should carry would. But if we don't see would, we can look for any of could, should, or might, plus have, plus a past participle verb, PPT for short. In other words, since we are using Roman figure 3 for this question, the main clause, the gap in the main clause here should be filled with would plus have plus past participle verb, PPT for short. So any option that contains would plus have plus a past participle verb, PPT for short, is the correct option for this question. And that option is option C. So that the question reads, if I had seen him, I would have arrested him. I believe this is understood. Let us move on with the class. Question number 8. It reads, no sooner had the party started, dash the lights went off. Option A, than. Option B, when. Option C, has. And option D, so. In case you don't know, this question is from the topic collocation. Collocation is the attributive tendency for two words or phrases to be used together. In English, there are some words and phrases that should be used together. Using one without the other renders the sentence incorrect. This is what we call collocation. It is the attributive tendency for two words or phrases to be used together. If you look at this question, you will find out that it contains the phrase no sooner. The phrase no sooner collocates with than. This means that if a question contains or carries the phrase no sooner, the gap in the question should be filled with than. Also, if a question contains or carries the word than, then the gap in the question should be filled with the phrase no sooner. The reason is that they collocate with each other. No sooner than, no sooner than. For that reason, the correct option for this question is option A. So that the question reads, no sooner had the party started than the lights went off. I believe this is understood. Please note that the word hardly, scarcely, or barely collocates with the word when. Hardly, scarcely, or barely, when. This means that if a question contains the word hardly, scarcely, or barely, then the gap in the question should be filled with the word when. Also, if a question contains the word when, then the gap in the question should be filled with the word hardly, scarcely, or barely, depending on the one used in the options. For example, hardly, scarcely, or barely had the program started when the lights went off. I believe that is understood. The word so collocates with the word that. So that. This means that if an English question contains the word so, then the gap in the question should be filled with the word that. Also, if an English question contains the word that, then the gap in the question should be filled with the word so. So that. They collocate with each other. For example, so great was the program that it was talked about for days. Another example, she was so hungry that she finished the food. I believe that is understood. Let us continue. The phrase not only collocates with the phrase but also. Not only but also. This means that if an English question contains the phrase not only, then the gap in the question should be filled with the phrase but also. Also, if an English question contains the phrase but also, then the gap in the question should be filled with the phrase not only. For example, not only is she a thief, but also a liar. I believe that is understood. Let us move on. The word although collocates with the word yet. Although yet. This means that if an English question contains the word although, then the gap in the question should be filled with the word yet. Also, if an English question contains the word yet, then the gap in the question should be filled with the word although. For example, although she prepared hard for the examination, yet she failed in it. I believe that is very much understood. Lastly, the word to, spelled as TOO, collocates with two things. Depending on what comes immediately after the gap they want you to fill in the question. If what comes immediately after the gap they want you to fill in the question is a noun or a pronoun, then the word to we collocate with the word for, so that you have two for. But if what comes immediately after the gap they want you to fill in the question is a verb, then the word to we collocate with the word to, spelled as TO. For example, the question is too difficult for me. You will notice that me is a pronoun. That is why to is collocating with for. Another example, the load is too heavy to carry. You will notice that carry is a verb. That is why to is collocating with to. I believe that is understood. Question number 9. It reads, she went abroad with a view to dash a business partner. Option A, finding. Option B, find. Option C, found. And option D, have found. If you look at this question, you will find out that it contains or carries the phrase with a view to. In case you don't know, whenever a question contains or carries the phrase with a view to, look forward to, devoted to, or whenever a question carries or contains the word prefer, mind, hate, or need, then the gap in the question should be filled with a gerund. If I say a gerund, I mean an ing verb. In case you don't know, a gerund is a verb that ends with ing, though playing the role of a noun or taking the position of a noun. A verb that ends with ing and plays the role of a noun or takes the position of a noun is what we call a gerund. And that is what you are expected to fill the gap with anytime an English question contains the phrase with a view to, look forward to, devoted to, or anytime an English question contains the word prefer, mind, hate, or need. Insofar this question contains the phrase with a view to, the gap in the question should be filled with a gerund, a verb that ends with ing, though playing the role of a noun. So the correct option for this question is option A. So that the question reads, she went abroad with a view to finding a business partner. I believe this is understood. From what we have learned in question number 9, it means that if we are asked a question of this nature, I look forward to dash you in the reception hall. Option A, see. Option B, have seen. Option C, seen. And option D, saw. Insofar the question contains the phrase look forward to, then the gap in the question should be filled with a gerund, a verb that ends with ing, though playing the role of a noun. So the correct option for this question is option C. So that the question reads, I look forward to seeing you in the reception hall. Also, if we are asked a question of this other nature, your hair needs dash. Option A, wash. Option B, washing. Option C, washed. And option D, washes. Insofar the question contains the word needs, then the gap in the question should be filled with a gerund, a verb that ends with ing, though playing the role of a noun or taking the position of a noun. Therefore, the correct option for this second question is option B. So that the question reads, your hair needs washing. I believe this is understood. Let us move on with the class. Question number 10. It reads, stop using dash words on the child. Option A, insultive. Option B, insultful. And option C, insulting. If you look at this question, you will find out that it implies stop using abusive words on the child. Please note that if a word or a person is abusive, we do not say that that word or that person is insultful. Neither do we say that that word or that person is insultive. It means that option A, insultive, is wrong, and option B, insultful, is also wrong. In fact, there is no word as insultive or insultful in the English language. If a word or a person is abusive, then we say the word or the person is insulting. Insulting. It should end with ing and not ive or ful. So the correct option for this question is option C. So that the question reads, stop using insulting words on the child. Let us look at few more things here so that you will understand much or a lot better. Please note that if something is difficult or if a person is deceitful, cunning, or crafty, we do not say that the person or the thing is trickish. Rather, we say that the person or the thing is tricky. Tricky. For example, Emeka is too tricky for my liking. Our teacher gave us a tricky question to answer. I believe that is understood. It is tricky and not trickish. If something, especially a dish, is flavored with pepper or other hot spices, we do not say that the dish is pepperish. Rather, we say that the dish is peppery. This dish is too peppery for my liking and not pepperish. I believe that is understood. If a person has symptoms of a fever, we do not say that the person is fevery. That is wrong. Rather, we say that the person is feverish. Emeka looks feverish today and not fevery. It is feverish and not fevery. It is peppery and not pepperish. It is tricky and not trickish. I believe that is understood. If a person plans to get what he or she wants, often by hurting or harming others, that is, if the person is scheming, we do not say that the person is calculative. Rather, we say that the person is calculating. Calculating. It is calculating and not calculative. For example, the boy is such a calculating young man. A calculating young man and not calculative young man. I believe that is understood. Let us move on. Yam that has been crushed by hitting it repeatedly. I say it again. Yam that has been crushed by hitting it repeatedly is not called pound yam. This is very wrong. It is actually called pounded yam. Pounded yam means yam that has been crushed by hitting it repeatedly. The truth is, the word pound can exist as a noun and as a verb. Pound exists in two parts of speech. It can exist as a noun. It can also exist as a verb. I don't want us to see it as a noun for now. I want us at this point to see it as a verb. If we see pound as a verb, then it means to crush something by hitting it repeatedly. As a verb, the present tense is pound. The past tense is pounded. And the past participle is also pounded. So we have pound, present tense, pounded, past tense, pounded, also past participle. If we use this verbal word, pound, adjectively, if we use it as an adjective to qualify the noun yam, to show that the yam has already been crushed by hitting it repeatedly, the rule is we are expected to use the past participle. That is the rule. If you are using a verbal word adjectively, that is to qualify a noun, you are expected to use the past participle. And the past participle of pound as a verb is pounded. That is why it is pounded yam. Pounded here used adjectively to qualify the noun yam. So it is pounded yam and not pound yam. I believe that is understood. Let us continue. Pepper that has been reduced to small particles or powder by crushing it is not called grinding pepper. It is not called grinded pepper. It is not called groundy pepper. It is not called grounded pepper. Pepper that has been reduced to small particles or powder by crushing it is actually called ground pepper. Ground pepper. Ground pepper. She went to the market and bought some freshly ground pepper. Ground pepper. The truth is, the word grind exists as a verb. It is a verbal word. The word grind is a verbal word. It exists as a verb. And it means to reduce something to small particles or powder by crushing it. The past tense of grind, take note, is what I call ground. The past participle is also ground. So it is grind, present tense, ground, past tense, ground, past participle. So if we decide to use this verbal word grind adjectively to qualify the noun pepper, to show that the pepper has already been reduced to small particles or powder by crushing it, we are expected to use the past participle. That is the rule. If you are using a verbal word adjectively, that is to qualify a noun, you are expected to use the past participle. And you will agree with me that the past participle of grind is ground. That is why pepper that has been reduced to small particles or powder by crushing it is called ground pepper. Ground pepper. Ground pepper. I believe that is understood. Let us look at the last one. A bullet that leaves the nozzle of a gun and hits an unintended target. I say it again. A bullet that leaves the nozzle of a gun and hits an unintended target is not called a strange bullet. It is not called a straight bullet. Rather, a bullet that leaves the nozzle of a gun and hits an unintended target is called a stray bullet. A stray bullet. The young girl was killed by a stray bullet. I believe this is understood.